You could dedicate an entire career to catching a single serial killer and then one day find yourself sitting right next to him and not even know. Hello everybody and welcome to this review of the novel Masquerade and the Nameless Women. This one by Eiji Mikage. It's released in English by Vertical. If you want to pick up your own copy, I do have links to Amazon and the book depository in the description down below. Now, arguably, this isn't really a light novel per se. It has no interior artwork, and certainly the age of the characters and the themes of this book are a little bit more mature than the average light novel. However, Mikage wrote the light novel series The Empty Box and Zeroth Maria, so it definitely makes this book of interest to light novel fans, and, well, just generally it's a pretty good read, so I would recommend checking it out. Masquerade and the Nameless Women is a murder mystery. It opens with the discovery of a corpse, one Reina Miyoko. Reina's face has been removed from the nose down and her foot has been amputated. These signs are very similar to other victims of a serial killer called Masquerade, although there are some slight variations in Reina's case. One of the people who is brought in to investigate is Yuri Uguisu. Now, Yuri has kind of two connections to this case. First of all, the whole reason that she's become a detective and sort of attached herself to the homicide unit is because her sister was the first victim of Masquerade, and she has dedicated herself, all of her schooling and career pursuits to this point to catch the serial killer. The second connection that she ends up discovering is that Reina Miyoko was one of her classmates back in high school. And so she has all sorts of sort of emotional ties to this case. And one of the challenges that she faces throughout the book is trying to separate her emotions from her detective work. Now, her senior detective on the case, Yamaji, he kind of sees the differences between what Masquerade typically does and what's been happening in this case. And so he decides that most likely this is a crime of passion. And so he brings in the three most likely suspects: Reina's father, her lover, and her fiancé. And he decides to interview them all and sort of see how they behave, if they have any tells, if they give away anything. And in order to help him catch these signs, he brings in Seiren Higano, and he is a psychologist who has had a great deal of success with Yamaji in the past. What no one knows is that Seiren is actually the serial killer Masquerade, and that in this particular case, he is taking a personal interest in it because he does not want Masquerade's name associated with such sloppy work. And so the bulk of the book really takes place over a 24-hour period as the suspects are interviewed and all sorts of odd and mysterious facts come out about Reina's life that eventually lead to the catching of her killer. One of my concerns going into this book was that knowing right from the start that Seiren was Masquerade was going to somehow decrease the tension in the story. In fact, it's not even a spoiler to tell you guys that, because not only is it mentioned in the blurb of the book, but we are told that he is Masquerade within the first couple pages of the novel. So really, Mikage never means for you to sort of be played with in terms of that revelation. That particular piece actually makes the book far more interesting, and that really has to do because of the characters and the way that the characters interact with one another. The vast majority of this book is actually told by Yuri's first-person point of view, and she is a excellent character for us to kind of view things through because she is a bit more of an emotional character. Obviously, as I said in the description of what the story is about, she has some fairly significant emotional ties to this case. In fact, it's suggested by Yamaji at least once or twice that maybe she should excuse herself from it because of those reasons. And we also get this kind of idea that like she's presented a little bit as a naive character, a character that is maybe a little too driven by her emotions and her emotional baggage. And yet, as the book unfolds, you start seeing that perhaps she has a way of thinking that is a bit different from the other police officers and even from Seirin himself, that makes her a really valuable resource as the book progresses. In fact, what's really interesting is the relationship between her and Seirin, or Masquerade. Seirin is a very prototypical, cold, aloof, very analytical individual. He has a great deal of charisma, though, because almost everything about him is polished. More than once they talk about his grace with his movements, how his speech and the way that his body reacts can be virtually mesmerizing in their perfection in so many ways. And the way that he is able to catch the tells of certain people or draw out information from them even unwillingly at their point, you realize that he is a bit of a manipulative character as well. So, I mean, of course, given the fact that he's a serial killer, I guess all of those things somewhat make sense. Now, with him and Yuri, their relationship throughout this book is very interesting because and I would say that that is probably one of the more integral components of the book. These two characters represent, obviously, the hunter and the hunted, although as you go along, you kind of wonder exactly who's playing which role. And in some ways, it almost feels like Seirin is probing Yuri to just kind of see, like, is this somebody who is actually going to catch me? Is this somebody who is so driven and actually has something unique about her enough that this is going to be my undoing? And what's really interesting about the book and about Seirin is that you get the impression that maybe he doesn't even mind that idea. Even Yamaji himself is a very fun kind of character. I mean, I must admit, at first, like, his very obvious sexism and the way he somewhat seems to look down on Yuri because she is A, a female, and B, a rookie, made me a little bit uncomfortable. But as the book progresses, you do find that he is a character that, yes, he does kind of have these flaws, but ultimately, he is a decent guy who is doing this job because he feels that he can actually fix some of the ills of the world. And you do get the impression that he is almost your stereotypical grizzled detective where his whole family life has kind of fallen apart and, you know, everything's kind of been sacrificed for the sake of the job. I never really felt like he was just a stereotype for the entire thing. There were enough sort of personality quirks and traits to him that he did feel like a fleshed out character, even though he was one of the more minor characters in the novel. Aside from the characters themselves, there's of course the actual murder mystery. And this again is kind of an interesting thing, and I will say that the mystery itself, some of the components that came out about it, were a little bit outlandish. I won't say so much so that the book doesn't at least somewhat sell them and make them plausible within its worldview, but they were still just that touch out of reality that I kind of felt it disconnected me a little bit from the story. Hence why, if you follow me on Goodreads, I didn't give it a perfect 5 out of 5 score. I would have given it like a 4.5 or something if they would have let me. But there was just these one or two little elements that I was kind of like, okay, I'm not quite sold. Maybe if the book was a little bit longer and a little more fleshed out, I would buy it a little bit more. But overall, though, the whole idea of masks, the idea of personalities and who you present to people and who you really are inside. This plays throughout the whole book. Of course, Seirin is the most obvious candidate for this, being Masquerade and yet putting forward this professional, I help the cops kind of persona. But even Yuri, she puts forward this front that she is a capable detective, that she wants to be a detective, but at the same time, we do get those senses of doubt within her that, you know, she starts to wonder just what has she done? What is this for herself? What is it out of a sense of obligation? is it right to even pursue this career out of something as, you know, simplistic as revenge? But at the same time, with the way that she has these interactions with Seirin and the way that she is in this case, you kind of get the idea that maybe she is wrong even in her own mind, that maybe she is exactly in the position that she should be. Now, of course, this whole idea of masks, this whole idea of personas and everything else, it extends far even beyond just these two characters. It, of course, extends to the three suspects in the case, and most definitely to Reina herself. There's all sorts of backstory about Reina that, well, I mean, it would be a massive spoiler for the book to tell you even a little bit of it, because it all ties into how she ended up dead. One of the things that Mikage does in this book that is kind of fun, and I actually recall him doing the exact same thing in Volume 1 of The Empty Box and Zeroth Maria, is that most of the book is linear. It starts off with the discovery of Reina's body and then it continues forward. But then at the end of the book, we actually have a couple of chapters, like a couple of scenes that take place earlier in the story. So we would not have seen them, and they reveal so much more about the characters and about the story and about, it just kind of alters your view in terms of what you have just finished reading. And as I said, he did this in The Empty Box and Zeroth Maria, the first volume, because that first volume was a Groundhog Day, and he numbered the days so that he would tell you an event that happened on, say, day 6,000, and then he would tell you what happened on day 5,000, which made 6,000 completely a different experience because now you knew the backstory of that. And he does a similar thing here, which I think works very, very well, and really just adds a whole new dimension to the book and to the story and to the characters themselves, and even to some of the things and theories that Yuri has had throughout the book. So overall, Masquerade and the Nameless Women, a really, really good book. I have to admit, like, I finished this book and I immediately got onto Twitter and I was like, you know, sent a private message to the guy that I talk to at Vertical sometimes, and I'm like, please tell me, like, there's got to be more. I mean, there's no way this is just a single book. And, well, so far it is. He's like, the only person who knows whether there's going to be any more is Mikage himself, and he hasn't said. So I really hope there is more, because I liked these characters and I wanted to see more of them going forward. For my next review, I'm going back to an older series that I have not read a new volume in some time, and, well, to be honest, part of the reason I'm doing it is for the Light Novel Podcast, and that's going to be volume number 3 of Psycho-Mei, Psycho Love Comedy. That'll be my next review. Until then, thanks for joining me in this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.